Imagine a single building holding the sum of every scroll, every tablet, every thought that ever existed in the ancient world, and then vanishing without a trace. The emptiness that followed left a hole so vast that historians still feel its echo in every modern library. The Library of Alexandria was more than a room of books. It was a sprawling complex perched on the Mediterranean coast, a magnet for scholars from Greece, Egypt, Persia, and beyond. Founded in the early 3rd century BCE, it grew under the Ptolemaic dynasty, which poured wealth into gathering, translating, and preserving knowledge. By the time the first Roman legions marched into Egypt, the library's shelves were said to hold hundreds of thousands of scrolls, covering astronomy, mathematics, poetry, medicine, and philosophy. The city itself buzzed with debate, experiments, and the hum of scribes copying texts from distant lands. It was the intellectual heart of the ancient world, a place where ideas collided and evolved. What exactly did the shelves contain? The answer is both tantalizing and frustrating, because no inventory survived. Yet we can piece together a picture from the few references that survived in later writings. One of the most famous acquisitions was the treatise on the stars by the Greek astronomer Hipparchus, a work that laid the groundwork for modern astronomy. The library also housed the Elements of Euclid, a treatise that would become the foundation of geometry for millennia. In the realm of medicine, the scrolls of Herophilus, who dissected human bodies in the name of science, were stored alongside the works of the Egyptian physician Al-Qadi. Poetry was not neglected. The verses of Sappho, once thought lost, were believed to have been copied onto papyrus and kept safely within the walls. Even the practical knowledge of daily life recipes for dyeing fabrics, instructions for building ships, and records of agricultural yields found a home there. The library was a true encyclopedia of human experience. Why did the library become a target? The answer lies in the politics of power and the symbolism of knowledge. Throughout its existence, the library survived wars, dynastic changes, and even a brief period of Roman occupation. Yet each shift in control brought new threats. The first major blow came during the civil war between Julius Caesar and Pompey. Caesar's forces set fire to the Egyptian fleet in the harbor, and the flames leapt to nearby warehouses. Ancient sources claim that a great part of the library was consumed. Modern scholars debate how much was actually lost then, but the image of a fire licking at scrolls, turning priceless knowledge into ash, has become iconic. Did the fire destroy half the collection, or merely a peripheral storage area? The truth remains elusive, but the event set a precedent. The library's fate was tied to the whims of conquerors. The second, more controversial, episode occurred in the early 4th century CE, when the Roman Emperor Constantine's successor, Theodosius I, declared Christianity the empire's official religion. A later historian, John of Nicaea, wrote that a decree ordered the destruction of pagan temples and their libraries. Some interpret this as the final nail in the library's coffin, a purposeful eradication of heretical knowledge. Yet archaeological evidence suggests that the main building had already fallen into ruin long before Theodosius's reign. The narrative of a single, dramatic demolition is compelling, but the reality was likely a slow, cumulative loss: fires, neglect, and the simple fact that papyrus degrades over centuries. In the end, the library didn't disappear in one night. It faded away piece by piece, like a sandcastle eroded by tide. What does the loss mean for us today? Consider that the method of exhaustion, an early form of integral calculus, was reportedly taught by Archimedes at Alexandria. If those lectures survived, perhaps the development of calculus could have occurred centuries earlier, reshaping engineering, physics, and even the Industrial Revolution. Or imagine the medical scrolls of Herophilus, who distinguished nerves from tendons and described the pulse with unprecedented accuracy. Those texts might have accelerated the understanding of human anatomy, possibly preventing the long reliance on animal dissection that delayed modern surgery. The loss isn't just about missing books. It's about missing stepping stones that could have propelled humanity forward at a different pace. Even the cultural impact is staggering. The library housed a museum, where philosophers debated under the shade of olive trees, a tradition that inspired the modern concept of a university. If more of those dialogues were recorded, we might have richer insights into Socratic methods, early political theory, and ethical frameworks that still influence contemporary thought. Some scholars argue that the very idea of a public, state-sponsored research institution was born there. The echo of that model can be heard in today's national libraries and research institutes. The loss of those institutional memories may have delayed the spread of the concept that knowledge belongs to all, not just a privileged few. The mystery deepens when we examine the surviving fragments that mention the library's cataloging system. According to the ancient scholar Callimachus, the library employed a pinax, essentially a card catalog that indexed works by title, author, and subject. This was an early form of metadata, a system that modern digital libraries still emulate. If the pinax had survived intact, we might have had a clearer view of how ancient scholars organized information, potentially influencing the evolution of library science. The very idea that a civilization over 2,000 years ago thought carefully about data retrieval is astonishing, and its disappearance left a gap that scholars only rediscovered in the Renaissance. One of the most tantalizing what-ifs involves the lost works of the philosopher Plotinus, whose writings on Neoplatonism shaped early Christian thought. Some fragments suggest he wrote a treatise on the nature of consciousness that prefigured modern neuroscience. If those pages had endured, the dialogue between philosophy and science could have begun centuries earlier, perhaps smoothing the contentious relationship between religion and empirical inquiry that plagued later eras. The loss of such a bridge illustrates how the library's destruction wasn't merely a physical loss, but a rupture in the intellectual continuity of humanity. Now, let's pause and ask, what if the Library of Alexandria never fell? Imagine a world where the scrolls were digitized, where the knowledge of ancient engineers, astronomers, and poets was handed down unchanged. Would we still be grappling with climate change? Or would early climate observations from Egyptian farmers have given us a head start on understanding long-term weather patterns? Would the Renaissance have been a Renaissance at all, or simply a continuation of a steady, unbroken tradition of scholarship? The questions are endless, and each one underscores how a single institution can ripple across millennia. The final twist lies not in the magnitude of what was lost, but in what survived by accident. Some works thought lost were rescued by scholars fleeing the chaos of the later Roman Empire. A handful of Euclidean manuscripts, for example, were carried to the Islamic world, translated into Arabic, and later retranslated into Latin during the medieval period. In this way, the knowledge of the library persisted, filtered through cultures, altered, and eventually returned to Europe. The story of the library is therefore not just a tragedy, but also a testament to the resilience of ideas. Even when the walls crumble, the words can find new homes, hidden in the margins of other texts, waiting to be rediscovered. So, what does the story of the Library of Alexandria teach us today? It reminds us that knowledge is fragile, that preservation requires intention, and that the loss of even a single repository can alter the trajectory of civilization. It also shows that the human drive to collect, organize, and share information is a constant, resurfacing across ages and empires. The library's ghost still haunts modern libraries, research institutions, and even our digital archives, urging us to protect what we have before it slips away. If you could rescue one scroll from the flames of antiquity, which would you choose? Would you pick a mathematical proof that could have accelerated technology, a medical manuscript that might have saved countless lives, or a poem that would have enriched the soul of generations? The answer reveals what we value most about the past, and perhaps what we hope to preserve for the future.